Welcome to this episode of Toronto Blue Jays Update. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop your opinion in the comments below because we want to hear what you're thinking about all of this. So here we are, deep into the offseason, and the question everyone's asking is whether the Blue Jays are actually done making moves. Free agency is winding down, spring training is literally around the corner, and we've got to start wrapping our heads around what this roster is going to look like come opening day. Our friends over at Blue Jays Nation just put out an interesting piece highlighting 3 remaining free agents the Jays could potentially target, and honestly, it's worth talking about because each of these guys presents a unique opportunity, but also some legitimate questions about fit and value. Let's start with the big name that keeps popping up, Cody Bellinger. Now, I know what you're thinking, because we've all seen the reports from Mitch Bannon suggesting the Blue Jays haven't been particularly engaged in the Bellinger sweepstakes. But here's the thing. With the Yankees essentially stepping back from negotiations after making their offer, there's suddenly an opening here. The question is whether the front office sees enough value to jump in. Bellinger put up a 5.1 WAR last season, which is legitimately impressive. And when you consider that both George Springer and Daulton Varsho are likely gone after this season, adding someone with Bellinger's upside on a longer-term deal actually makes some sense from a roster construction standpoint. But let's be real about the concerns here. We're talking about committing over $160 million to a player who has shown incredible ceiling, but also some truly concerning valleys throughout his career. The floor with Bellinger can be really low, and that's a legitimate risk when you're talking about that kind of financial commitment. It feels like the front office has started taking a more conservative approach after landing Kyle Tucker, and I'm not entirely sure they view Bellinger as worth the investment compared to giving everyday playing time to guys like Addison Barger or Nathan Lukes. There's value in seeing what your own internal options can do, especially when you're trying to build sustainable success. The second name on that list is Eugenio Suarez. And this one is honestly fascinating because the guy just mashed 49 home runs. Who wouldn't want that kind of power in their lineup? The issue is pretty obvious, though. Where exactly does he fit? We've already got Okamoto at third base, a guy we just invested in and want to see what he can do. Add Suarez into the mix, and suddenly you've got a serious logjam at the hot corner. Sure, Okamoto can play some outfield, but then you're creating problems elsewhere just to fit another piece into the puzzle. When you really break down the infield, it's pretty well set. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is locked in at first, Ernie Clement earned the everyday second base job with his performance last year, and Andres Gimenez is expected to be your everyday shortstop providing elite defense. Throwing Suarez into that equation just complicates things unnecessarily. Now, if we're talking about a one-year deal just to add some serious power for this season, maybe there's a conversation to be had, but even then you're asking where everyone plays and who loses at bats. The reality is, adding good players always makes your team better on paper, but you have to consider whether it's worth the cost and the roster complications, especially when the front office seems to feel they've already addressed the major holes. The third option, and probably the most realistic if they do anything at all, is bringing back Seranthony Dominguez. This one actually surprises me a bit because we haven't heard much about it despite Dominguez being a solid contributor out of the bullpen last year. He finished with an ERA just over 3, which is respectable, even though the walk rate was higher than you'd like. The bullpen could definitely use another arm, especially when you start looking at some of the question marks in that group. Jeff Hoffman is coming off a down year, Genesis Cabrera is returning from back-to-back injury-plagued seasons, and Brandon Little's walk rate remains a constant concern. Adding someone like Dominguez or another middle relief option makes a ton of sense, and it's the kind of move that doesn't break the bank but adds valuable depth. Whether it's through free agency or a minor trade, I'd expect to see at least one more bullpen arm added before camp opens. These aren't the splashy moves that get everyone fired up, but they're the kind of practical additions that can make a real difference over a long season. So where does that leave us? Honestly, I think the heavy lifting is done. The Blue Jays went out early and aggressively, landing guys like Tyler Rogers and addressing the rotation. They made their big swing with the Tucker extension. At this point, any additional moves are likely to be depth pieces, minor league signings, or maybe a low-cost bullpen arm. Could they surprise us and jump in on Bellinger or Suarez? Sure, but it doesn't feel likely based on how things have played out and the signals coming from the front office. The reality is other teams out there are more desperate and have bigger holes to fill. The Yankees, for example, probably need Bellinger more than we do at this point. The Blue Jays can afford to sit back, let the market play out, and pick up whatever value remains without forcing anything. That's not a bad position to be in, especially after an offseason where they've already accomplished quite a bit. If another move happens, great, we'll all get excited. But walking into spring training with this roster as constructed isn't the worst-case scenario either. Let us know what you think in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.